We got Daniel, Danny, and Danny. Anyway, we got the whole Daniel triangle thing going on tonight. Danny Shaw, your thoughts on this? Initial thoughts, at least.
Yes, as Daniel has laid out, the supreme hypocrisy coming out of Biden and Washington's mouth. Why doesn't he say that the Gulf kingdoms are soulless, or all of their minions and lackeys, whether it's in Haiti or the Dominican Republic or in India, wherever countries continue to do the bidding of the U.S., then those are the countries that have a quote-unquote soul. So we have to read between the lines here. What Biden and the U.S. ruling class has been saying now for over a decade is they'll never forgive Putin for any degree of sovereignty, geopolitical sovereignty, sovereignty in Russian internal and external affairs, Russian foreign policy. They want to return Russia, this massive piece of the global chessboard, to the years of Boris Yeltsin, where transnational capital, chiefly U.S. capital, could go in and buy up the massive gas and nickel resources within Russia. And to the extent that Putin and the nationalist government of Russia represents a barrier to them, they will vilify and demonize Putin and the Russian state. And that's why they've gotten behind Navalny, because they understand that Navalny is their man in Moscow and St. Petersburg, so they can go back to the post-Soviet days when they could slice and cut through the soul of Russia.
Right, and Daniel Lazar, how do you see this playing out now? Biden, or I should say possibly Washington and Moscow ties. I mean, this is kind of a frosty start. And we know there are disarmament treaties that need to be hammered out by the two. There's trade that needs to be hammered out. You mentioned possible a new set of sanctions. Seems like the Russians feel like it's heading their way due to this allegations of election meddling. So how do you feel the first year of Joe Biden's presidency is going to play out with the Russians?
Well, it's difficult to say, but the Democrats have just painted themselves into a corner. They have engaged in just completely reckless anti-Russian rhetoric for the last 5 years, and it's very hard for them to back down at this point, as they will have to do at some point. Look, Joe Biden is the Konstantin Chernenko of American politics. Chernenko was the Russian prime minister who was appointed in the early 80s to replace Yuri Andropov. He was a sick old man, and he was doddering, he was weak, he was at death's door, and in fact, he died 15 months later. But his decrepitude was seen as an indication, a sign of the decrepitude of the Soviet system. And Joe Biden is the same way. He is a man suffering from senile dementia. His words don't make sense. And clearly, he signals the decrepitude of, first and foremost, the Democratic Party, and secondly, of the U.S. system in general. This is a system that just 2 months ago, by the way, was enveloped in violence when a mob invaded Congress and sent members of the House and Senate fleeing for their lives. So America is very unstable. The country is clearly in trouble, and Biden's ridiculous rhetoric is an indication of how deep the trouble goes.
And Danny Shaw, do you agree with that? That in a way, over the last 4 years, Democrats kind of got themselves in a corner. I mean, they criticized everything that Donald Trump did when it came to Vladimir Putin, basically leaving Joe Biden no other option to how he's going to deal with the man.
Yeah, and that's not to say that the Republicans were in any way looking for peace with Russia. I just think that led by Trump, the Republicans were looking to invest more in Russia. They didn't want to gain through sanctions. They wanted to gain through direct foreign investment. So both wings of this vulture, of this capitalist, imperialist vulture, want to sink their teeth into Russia. It's just a question of how. And it's the same thing with Cuba and Venezuela and Iran and Zimbabwe. the debate is not the strategic objective of the Obama or Biden or Trump or Bush or Clinton administration. The debate is about what tactics are going to be the most useful in terms of achieving these goals. Here in the U.S., we're subjected, as Daniel's laid out, to a steady diet of Russia phobia, Russiagate, and then they had this big headline that the Russians had paid the Afghanis a bounty on Americans' heads without ever asking, do Afghanis want to be occupied and invaded and bombed every day by U.S. soldiers and the U.S. military? So day after day, it's xenophobic and Russia-phobic and Cuban-phobic headlines here, because the unofficial religion of the United States is anti-communism, anti-socialism. That's not to say that Russia is in any way socialist, but to the extent that Russia has any degree of economic, political, or military, or diplomatic nationalism, Washington will stop at nothing in this process of trying to demonize in order to recolonize Russia. What Russia's intervention in Syria in 2011, this was unforgivable before both the Democrats and the Republicans.
All right, gentlemen, that's all the time we have. Thank you both for joining us in the program. Both from New York, Daniel Lazar and Danny Shaw joining us. And viewers, that's a wrap for this segment of your Press TV's News Review program. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye for now.